There's a question that doesn't get asked enough. Not, did you survive it? Because clearly, you did. You're here. But something quieter than that. Something most people never think to ask. Did surviving it leave something behind in you? Not the kind of thing people put on motivational posters. Not the soft, packaged version of resilience that gets applauded at graduation ceremonies. Something more structural than that. Something that actually rewired how your mind works. Because here's what the research keeps showing us. Genuine adversity doesn't just build character in the abstract sense. It literally changes how your brain processes threat, emotion, connection, and meaning. And in some people, what gets built is a kind of intelligence that the people who had easier lives never had a reason to develop. Today, we're going to walk through 7 specific signs of that. Not to romanticize suffering, not to say the hard thing was secretly worth it, but to name what you actually built, clearly, honestly, and without the usual inspirational packaging. Sign 1. You can stay in difficult conversations without flinching. Someone brings up their divorce, a death in the family, a fear they've never said out loud to anyone, and you don't redirect. You don't reach for something lighter to say. You just stay there with them. Most people can't do this. Not because they don't care, but because they haven't spent enough time inside their own discomfort to know what it feels like when the darkness doesn't actually destroy you. You have, and that makes you one of the rarest things a person in pain can stumble across, someone who won't flinch. There's a clinical layer to this worth understanding. For people who didn't live through one sharp event, but through something longer, years of emotional unpredictability, environments that were never quite safe, a kind of chronic low-level weight that was always there, psychologists recognize a specific pattern. Sometimes called complex trauma, and one of its less discussed effects is this: it builds an almost uncanny capacity for sitting with pain. Yours and other people's. You've already been inside it long enough to know it has edges. You came back. That knowledge lives in your body now. Sign 2. Pressure doesn't hit you the same way it hits others. Watch someone who has genuinely been through a crisis when something goes wrong in the room. There's a quality to their decision-making that's hard to describe. It's not confidence, exactly. It's more like groundedness. A kind of quiet that comes from the body already knowing, we've been here before, and we found the way out. When things get chaotic around you, something in you gets stiller. Not because you're suppressing anything, but because your nervous system has already been calibrated by real stakes. It knows how to orient under pressure, because it had no other choice but to learn. People around you have probably looked to you in crises in a way that felt slightly disproportionate to what you were visibly doing. They sensed something steady in you. That steadiness wasn't given to you. It was built inside conditions most people would have fallen apart in. Sign 3. You have a different relationship with not knowing. People who haven't been tested much tend to need resolution. They need things wrapped up, decided, concluded. Ambiguity makes them reach for easy answers, not because they're weak, but because they've never been forced to function inside genuine uncertainty for extended periods. You have. You've lived inside situations where the outcome was genuinely unknown for months. Where there was no instruction manual and no one who could tell you how it would end. And you had to keep going anyway. Keep making decisions, keep showing up, keep moving, without knowing if any of it would matter. Psychologists call this ambiguity tolerance. And it correlates meaningfully with creative problem-solving, complex reasoning, and the ability to lead effectively. You developed it the hard way, not through a course, not through practice exercises, but because you were handed a situation with no clear answer and had to find your own way through it anyway. Sign 4. You've lost interest in performance. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes after real suffering. It makes surface-level social performance feel genuinely unbearable. The careful, curated version of yourself you're supposed to present for other people's comfort. Conversations that carefully avoid anything real. The smile that doesn't mean anything. Something about going through genuine hardship strips away a layer of the social veneer. And some people find they can't fully put it back on afterward. Not because they're broken, but because they went through something that fundamentally restructured what actually matters to them. This is one of the core mechanisms behind what researchers call post-traumatic growth. Not just surviving, but emerging with a recalibrated sense of what deserves your energy and who deserves your presence. Some people find that quality unsettling. They feel the depth in you before you've said anything and it makes them uncomfortable. The right people? They find it like oxygen. Sign 5. You understand your emotions, not just feel them. This is different from what people usually mean when they say emotional intelligence. It's not that you perform emotional awareness. It's that you've actually been inside the basement of yourself. The grief you didn't ask for, the anger that had nowhere to go. The specific kind of loneliness that comes from carrying something too heavy to fully explain to anyone. That kind of internal experience, even when it was involuntary and painful, builds a level of self-knowledge that is genuinely difficult to develop any other way. You don't just feel things. You understand where they're coming from. You can trace the emotional thread back to its source. That's not a small thing. Most people go their entire lives responding to emotions they never quite understand, driven by patterns they can't see. You've been inside yours long enough to start recognizing the architecture. Sign 6. You read rooms the way other people read words. You walk into a space and something in you has already taken inventory before you've consciously processed anything. The tension between two people who are pretending nothing is wrong. The person in the corner whose smile hasn't reached their eyes. The specific energy of a room where something important is being left unsaid. You didn't take a class in this. You didn't practice it. You developed it because at some point in your life, reading the emotional environment around you wasn't a social skill, it was a necessity. Your brain learned to pick up signals that other people filter out entirely, because in your world, those signals mattered. Research on early adversity and stress response shows that people raised in emotionally unpredictable environments often develop a highly refined sensitivity to social and emotional information. The brain, particularly the threat detection systems, becomes calibrated to detect subtle cues that most people never consciously notice. What others experience as a vague feeling that something's off, you experience almost like clear data. That mechanism is real, it's measurable, and it is, underneath everything else, a form of trained emotional intelligence. Sign 7. You know how to grieve, and that is rarer than people realize. The capacity to actually sit inside loss, without immediately trying to fix it, reframe it, skip ahead, or make it mean something useful, is one of the most cognitively and emotionally sophisticated things a person can do. It requires the ability to hold something unresolved, to stay with discomfort that has no timetable, to know, in your body, that you can carry weight without collapsing under it. Most people are genuinely terrible at this, not because they're weak, but because they've never been forced to develop the skill. They've spent their lives building careful systems to avoid this exact kind of sitting. You've been forced into a depth of emotional processing that many people never reach voluntarily. And what comes out on the other side of that is something quiet but real, a relationship with impermanence that reshapes how you love, how you decide, and what you choose to pay attention to. Here's what I want to leave you with. None of what we talked about today is a justification for what you went through. It doesn't make the hard thing acceptable, or secretly necessary, or part of some tidy story with a good ending. Some things were too much. They should not have happened the way they did. That's allowed to be completely true. And at the same time, you took what happened, and something in your mind built with it. Something quiet, and real, and not easily put into words. The people in your life who are most drawn to you, who feel steadiest around you, who reach for you when they have nowhere else to go, they're not responding to your resume or your presentation. They're responding to someone who went somewhere most people never go, and came back carrying more than they left with. You are not someone who barely made it through. You are someone who went into something very few people go into, and found out what you were actually made of. If parts of this felt personally familiar, I've linked something in the description and pinned comment below. It's a set of structured, practical guides built specifically around things like emotional regulation, overthinking, and building steadier daily patterns. Simple, step by step, nothing overwhelming. If that sounds useful, I hope you check it out. And if this video reached you in some way, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. See you there.